The purpose of this training today, what really is been motivating me lately is I've just concluded I have not encountered a business that doesn't need at least one webinar in their business. It used to be back in the day where maybe there was some outliers that existed, but I have not found a business today where a webinar wouldn't be a dramatic, powerful, one of the most, if not the most effective tool that they could do in their business, both in the short term as well as in the long term. The only challenge is the lack of imagination. A lot of people think a webinar is designed and specifically only available to do one particular thing, or maybe two or three different things, and if their business doesn't naturally fall within that thing, then they can't do it. And that's unfortunate, because I just kind of look back at the last 11 years of webinars that I've done and that our company Rapid Crush has done, and there's been some really innovative, really effective ways that we've found to sell pretty much anything to anyone in any industry at any price point utilizing webinars. Most of these people aren't even aware exist because we innovated these models and then we never really taught them or shared them. So that's my goal here today. All right, so if that works out good for you, please let me know. And what I'm going to do here is now share my screen. You will be seeing me on the slide. Webinar models by Jason Fladlien. And if so, give me a thumbs up. So I'm just going to walk you through different models. And this first model is the most applicable model that I've discovered that every business should have if they have no other type of webinar in their business. It's what I call an on-demand webinar. And I know this sounds kind of funny because an on-demand webinar is just a webinar replay or something that pretends to have been a live webinar at one point in time that's been recorded that somebody can access, usually by exchanging their name, email address, and or phone number. Okay? And so an on-demand webinar is literally just a recording of a video. And you say, well, Jason, if it's just a video, why don't we just say opt in for this free video? Two problems with that. Problem number one is the framing. People have a certain association to the word video, and they have a higher value attribution to the word webinar. A webinar in most people's mind is more focused on education and being valuable, and a video could be just something you watch off of YouTube. It could be entertaining. It's a static, boring video. If it's in a sales situation, usually sales videos are not very fun to watch because they're very much problem, agitate, solve, that kind of promotional scheme. Now, even if you just want to record something one time and it's only 20 or 30 minutes and you want to do it on your own without actually doing the webinar live, but still calling it a webinar and saying, hey, we recently did this webinar. For a limited time, you can access this webinar recording, all right? If you just wanted to do that from a positioning, that can work really well, provided, of course, it still has to look and feel like a real webinar. If you just take an old boring video or just any old video and say, hey, this is an on-demand webinar that for a limited time, we recently just did this webinar and you can access it now. You might not be able to access it in the future, but right now it's currently available, so get it while you can, right? And then they opt in to watch this webinar, which is just a recording, and it doesn't feel like it was a webinar at one point in time, then it doesn't work. So you can't just put lipstick on a pig and pretend that it's a supermodel, right? And so in this particular case, even if you pre-record the webinar, even if you never did the webinar live, and even though it's not traditionally really a webinar, you need things like back and forth. You need it to be conversational in nature. It still needs to lead with some sort of education or enlightenment before you proceed any further. Now, if you take a static sales video or like, does that ring true to you? Or tell me what your thoughts are on that. Or that makes sense, doesn't it? Or hey, have you ever had this happen to you? It comes across as inauthentic. Because there was never a point in time where a pre-recorded regular old video had the ability to be interactive. But even if a webinar is recorded, the perception in the marketplace is that, well, when it was done live, it could have been interactive. It could have been conversational and consultative, whatever you call it, right? And even though I'm watching the recording of that, I'm watching the recording of something that was at one point in time a very effective, very powerful webinar. So therefore, what I'm watching is more valuable than just a video. And if you get that one concept, that should immediately make you want to do a webinar. Even if you have no plans on how do I get people on this webinar, we'll talk about that here shortly. Even if you're like, well, I don't traditionally have a normal webinar because I don't sell a high ticket this or that, or it can't be delivered onesie twosies, whatever the case may be, right? You should still do this anyway, because the positioning of a webinar has a higher value associated to it than any other type of interaction for educating and also moving people forward in the sales process. So every other model I'm going to show you today can be pretty much utilized with an on-demand webinar. And that's why I feel like everybody has the ability to use a webinar in their business. Now, you can give them this webinar freely without even name capturing or any information collected, or you could do it with name capture collection. Now, let me talk to you more specifically about how you would promote this thing, because this is the thing that hangs everybody up. It drives me nuts. I've gotten quite angry on this concept of, Jason, I don't know how to put people on my webinar, so therefore I'm not going to do a webinar until I know how to put people on the webinar. It's kind of like, I'm not going to bait my hook until I can prove that a fish will bite my hook. Well, you need the bait. So create the webinar first. Solve one problem at a time. You solve the webinar problem once and then it's solved forever. And then the traffic problem will always persist in some way, shape, or form. But that's just a matter of switching things in and switching things out and trying new things, but you can't go fishing without the bait. And the webinar is the bait. So here's what's great about an on-demand webinar. It's the most easiest way to start promoting and testing things out. And so like on a website, so yourwebsite.com, your homepage, your brand page, any page you wish, put a little header bar that says webinar available for a limited time. Check it out here. And then they click on that and they say, we recently did this webinar for a limited time. We're allowing you to view it on demand. Just give me your name and your email and then I'll show it to you. And that's going to be the most effective way that I have found that you can lead capture on any corporate website, on any homepage, on any default page where you're getting traffic. You could have it slide up. So sometimes you could do logic like this. You can use a plugin like Opt-in Monster or a service like that, where once they scroll below the fold, then a thing slides up from the bottom. It says, recently done webinar, available for free for a limited time. Click here for more information. Or anywhere you can put a call to action bar or section, you can promote this. Oftentimes for professionals, because we've been working a lot lately with professionals like doctors and lawyers and accountants, et cetera, right? I tell them just put it in your email signature. So when you go and interact back and forth with clients, prospects, or anybody in your company or team, they are interacting with a work email. P.S. We recently conducted a webinar that we're making available on demand for a limited time on blank. Click here for more information. Or check out this webinar we recently did. Click here for more information. Now, obviously not just webinar. Check out this webinar on blank, sexy title, sexy benefit, right? And now that's automatic marketing. And then like a bio box, if you're writing articles for third-party sites, or if there's some sort of way you're putting your name out there, distributing it. Here's what's great about this. If you have taken the time to create the webinar the way that we teach, or if you've hired us to create your webinar for you, it is going to be about your best approximation of what you do as a company or what you represent as an individual or why you should be chosen as opposed to other things for what you provide, right? That's what the webinar does. So it doesn't matter if 1 or 2 people a day see it, you will get free money that you otherwise wouldn't get. A lot of people who now do selling one-to-one, if they just captured this version of themselves, repeating the same conversation over and over again and put it on this webinar and made it on demand, any sales you make are sales you otherwise wouldn't get. So the idea here isn't to make $1 million by doing everything right. It's to make $10,000 by doing almost nothing, but also put yourself in a position to then test, leverage, and use this webinar in other ways. Exit traffic is a fantastic way to use this. Anytime somebody bounces back, leaves your page, tries to go somewhere else, hey, wait, before you go, check out this webinar that we did here, right? So the best uses of this is what I've been telling clients lately. What is your webinar really? I said, your webinar is your I have a dream speech. That's what, if nothing else in your company, you should have a webinar that's your I have a dream speech. It's, I've taken the stand on this thing, damn it, and here's what I know about this thing, and here's why I feel compelled to help you understand this thing, that if you truly understand it, it would change your life. It's that thing that you put a lot of effort into one time, and then you never have to do it again. because you really took the time to sit down and capture the best version of you or your company and what you stand for and what you can do in the marketplace. That's your I have a dream speech. And that should be your webinar. Your webinar should be that. So if you have no other reason to do a webinar, make it your I have a dream speech and then make it on demand so it's freely and easily available. See what happens and then play with it. So this is the best version of what you do for the client that can't be matched anywhere else by anyone else. Every single one of us who get into business, who want to really make a difference, we don't make a Me Too product. We create a unique product. And so for somebody out there or somebody's out there, you truly are the best solution. You're not the best solution necessarily for everybody, but for some people, you are truly the best. And you want them to be empowered. Otherwise, why would you be in business? It's foolish to be in business if you don't want to help clients, because not helping clients or not helping customers is harder to make money than helping customers is. So we all want to help. If for no other reason, then it makes us more money. And so having you represented and captured with the best essence of who you are, the preeminence of what you stand for, is going to always help your business, whereas not having that will harm your business. And this is a webinar that, if nothing else, should be passionate, motivational, and emotional. This is the type of webinar where people feel it in the heart, not just in the head. This is the type of webinar, if somebody listens to it, they say, I will never be the same again. And who can benefit from that webinar? Anybody, right? And obviously, these are webinars now that we've been shifting the focus on creating for the company, because we often work with people who've spent years and hours obsessing over a topic. And two problems. One, they're too close to the work, but the second thing is they are focusing on the logic and not on the emotion. They don't realize that people need to feel it in the heart before it will move them. And that's what a webinar can do way better than I found that anything else can do, in terms of, yeah, if we wanted to hire a camera crew, follow you around for 6 months, capture you in your best essence, and do really fancy video production, it might be a little bit better from a persuasion standpoint, but it took 100 times more effort. Or the webinar is the 80-20. It just gets done. It gets done once. It's an intense, tight sprint, but it will be done, and then you can be leveraged for a very, very long time, if not forever. So that's the first type of webinar, the on-demand webinar. It's the most flexible. It is the default webinar you should consider to use if you can't think of any other way to use the webinar, because the webinar is, without a doubt, the most effective tool